More yawn. Okay, great. Thank you, Nina. And we'll give folks a few minutes to join the webinar. So welcome. I think we have just a couple attendees joining now. So as usual, in the past few Friday meetings, we'll give folks until 8:35 to join the webinar, and then we'll get started. It's 8:31 right now. My name is Kristen Nevedal. I'm the director of the Mendocino Cannabis Department. And so I'm just going to go ahead and mute my mic, and then we'll get started, as I mentioned, at 8:35. Nina, would you be so kind as to make me a host? There we go. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right, folks, it's 8:33. Excuse me, we're going to give everyone just a couple more minutes to join the webinar. We will start promptly at 8:35. I'm Kristen Nevedal, the director of the Mendocino County Cannabis Department. With us today, we have Nina Holloway assisting us in providing this webinar meeting to the public. And so we'll just give everybody one more minute, and then we'll get going. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Mendocino Cannabis Department's weekly public meeting. It is March 4th, and it is time for us to get started. Let's see here. There we go. So during today's meeting, we're going to provide a few updates, but the vast majority of the conversation today is going to be about provisional licenses and CEQA requirements. So I apologize ahead of time. The presentation is pretty minutia rich. We'll stop after the presentation and make some time available for public comment. We won't be taking questions or comments during the presentation, except for you are more than welcome to utilize the chat feature, the Q&A chat feature, to send questions throughout the course of the presentation. When you use the Q&A chat feature, you can, the questions, and the comments come just to Nina and I because we're the only ones logged on as presenters today for this webinar. So if you're looking for that Q&A chat feature, it's usually either at the top of your screen or the bottom of your screen in the toolbar, and it is just a little chat box and it says Q&A. Click on it, it will open up a typing box for you to enter your questions or comments. Unfortunately, if you have called in, you will not have that feature, but we will make time available for public comment, and then we'll repeat this information when we get into the public comment sections. Folks, if you are interested in making a public comment, we do ask that you raise your hand, and then we'll go to individuals who have raised their hand in the order that they've raised their hand. So the raise hand feature, if you're on the Zoom app, is going to be located in the same toolbar as the Q&A feature, or at the bottom of your screen, and it is just a little hand. Click it to raise it, click it to lower it. If you're calling in, the *9 feature on your phone or on your dial pad is what will raise your hand or lower your hand. And then we'll talk about muting and unmuting when we get to that point in public comment. Important dates. A lot of these are the same. There's a couple new features on here we're going to talk about. I do want folks to know that we did get out 30-day corrections portal eligibility notices by February 28th. So we wrapped those up. There's a few folks that we're still working with to get eligibility to as they've wrapped up some things. And we're working through vegetation modification materials. We have not yet completed our review of information that has been sent in. And I also want folks to know if you requested a 30-day extension, we have not reviewed those yet to determine whether or not we'll be granting an extension. You probably won't hear from us regarding the extension matter until Tuesday of next week. We are working diligently as a group and peer reviewing the information that's come in. We'll be peer reviewing the request for extension on Monday afternoon with other materials. So don't panic. We're still working through, and it's going to take us a little bit of time to get back to you all. I have noted here our March weekly meetings. So the dates are here. They'll all be on Fridays from 8:30 to 10. A note for everyone is that March 16th will be our monthly local equity entrepreneur meeting. That's a Wednesday, not a Friday. And those meetings are from 3:30 to 5. They're always the third Wednesday of the month. But a couple new things coming up on March 23rd, and I don't have the time yet. The Department of Cannabis Control will be holding a public hearing, and then they'll be holding a second one on April 19th. This is in relationship to draft permanent regulations, which are supposed to be published today at 9:30 a.m. We'll talk a little more about those in just a moment here. On March 28th, 2022, at 12:01 a.m., the 30-day corrections portal will open, and on March 28th at 11:59 p.m., I'm sorry, April 28th at 11:59 p.m., the 30-day corrections portal will close. Some portal application statistics. We had 141 applications prior to opening the portal that did not need to come through the portal because those applications were in good standing. Of those applications that were sent to the portal, 157 are deemed complete. Plus there's another 6 that were deemed complete that have vegetation modification identified on them. Meaning that today we have 304 complete applications to process. Versus 316 incomplete applications. So we sent out 316 eligibility letters over the course of the weekend and wrapped them up on Monday before close of business. We have 34 applicants who submitted information to the portal that was incomplete, but that we identified vegetation modification on. If we can clear those applications for the vegetation modification, we'll notify them and they'll be able to complete their applications through the portal. We have 14 applications that were denied outside of the portal, plus another 16 that are slated for denial that submitted to the portal. And then we have 130 applicants who failed to respond to the portal at all. They were assigned to the portal but failed to respond. Those applications are slated for denial as well. We've seen 21 applications withdrawn prior to the portal to have been canceled. So the number of applications included in this table are 837, and of that 837, 659 were assigned to the portal. And we had 529 applicants respond to the portal. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Department of Cannabis Control. They are slated, as I mentioned, to release draft permanent regulations today at 9:30 a.m., which will kick off a 45-day comment period. The Department of Cannabis Control's process for accepting public comments will be outlined in a new research page that you can find on their website by going to cannabis.ca.gov. Comments will be accepted via a specified email address, so you'll want to make sure you check out the website to get the email address so that you can send in your public comment. Comments will also be accepted via snail mail or regular mail. And at the two public meetings I mentioned earlier that will be held on March 23rd and April 19th. The deadline to submit comments regarding the draft permanent regulations is April 19th at 5 p.m. Following the 45-day public comment period, the Department of Cannabis Control will release modifications to the proposed text. And those modifications, once they're released, will trigger a 15-day public comment period, during which members of the public will have another opportunity to submit comments. However, during that 15-day public comment period, the comments submitted must be in reference to any modifications that were made by the Department of Cannabis Control. The department's website will include tips for submitting public comments. And DCC staff has stressed that public comments should only be submitted one time, meaning that there's no need to submit via regular mail or snail mail and to submit via email. One or the other will be fine. Once the public comment process is completed, the regulations will be submitted by the department to the Office of Administrative Law, which will have 30 days to approve the regulations and submit them to the Secretary of State for adoption. The completion of this process is expected to occur in the fall of this year, which is also when the regulations will go into effect. Important to note that department staff has stressed that they will not be able to engage in any meetings or conversations about the proposed regulatory text until once the regulations are released. And so they have to wrap up the comment period before they will be able to have conversations or meetings regarding the proposed regulations. Okay, we are going to transition to provisional licenses here in just a minute. One of our attendees, it looks like maybe the DCC has updated their website since I last looked at it, and that the meetings are likely to start at 10 a.m. We will keep you posted, but also please do keep checking into the DCC's website, which is cannabis.ca.gov. Okay, let's talk a little bit about provisional licenses, and then we'll talk about CEQA. And we'll try to make this not too painful of a conversation because it is fairly rich in minutia. So the provisional license information that I've included are out of the regulations that were produced by the Department of Cannabis Control. You can find those regulations on the DCC's website. So it's just looking at the regulations. And so just so everyone knows, The provisional licensing section starts with number 15001. So what I've included in these slides is a brief summary of what is in the regulations. So some general considerations, limitations, and scale caps of note in the regulations. No provisional license issued by the Department of Cannabis Control shall be effective after January 1st of 2026. So if you have a provisional license and you haven't transitioned into an annual by January 1st of 2026, your provisional license will simply expire and you will not have a license until you can achieve annual licensure. No new provisional licenses may be issued for cultivation on or after January 1st of 2022 if the issuance of that provisional license would cause the commercial cannabis business to hold multiple cultivation licenses on contiguous premises in excess of 1 acre of total canopy for outdoor cultivation or more than 22,000 square feet of mixed light or indoor cultivation. Additionally, the Department of Cannabis Control shall not renew a provisional license after January 1st of 2023 if renewing the license would cause a licensee to hold multiple cultivation licenses on contiguous premises in excess of 1 acre of outdoor cultivation or in excess of 22,000 square feet of mixed light or indoor cultivation. So, for provisional licenses issued until June 30th of 2022, the department or the Department of Cannabis Control may issue a provisional license to a commercial cannabis business if the applicant submits a complete application on or before March 31st, so that's right around the corner at the end of the month. For applications that include cultivation activities, the applicant must also provide any of the following documents: a final lake and streambed alteration agreement from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, a draft streambed lake and streambed alteration agreement that is signed by the applicant and returned to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, or written verification by DFW that a streambed alteration agreement is not needed, or written verification by DFW, gosh, sorry about that typo there, that the applicant submitted a notification, right, described in various subsections, which I admitted here. They've submitted the payment of the applicable fees and they are responsive to DFW. Okay, so this is important for folks as you're wrapping up your applications with the county, because with the DFW requirements, the minimum threshold for eligibility for a provisional license, and we have a number of applicants in our application pool who are just applying for the first time for their state licenses. The minimum requirement that you need to meet to obtain a provisional license is to have written verification by DFW that the applicant has submitted a notification, submitted the payment of the applicable fees for that notification, and is responsive to DFW. For provisional license issuance after June 30th of 2022 and until September 30th of 2022, the Department of Cannabis Control may issue a provisional license to a commercial cannabis business if the applicant submits a complete application and the required application fee to the Department of Cannabis Control on or before June 30th of this year. The commercial cannabis business, if it's applying for a cultivation license for a premise, may not exceed 20,000 square feet of total canopy for outdoor cultivation. The commercial cannabis business must provide any of the following documents. Again, a final lake and streambed alteration agreement, a draft lake and streambed alteration agreement that has been signed by the applicant and returned to DFW, or written notification by DFW that a streambed alteration agreement is not needed, or written verification by DFW that the applicant has submitted a notification, submitted the payment of the applicable fees, and is responsive to DFW. So these two dates until June 30th for our farmers here, because everyone is under the 20,000 square foot threshold, folks have until September 30th if they have applied by June 30th to be eligible or remain eligible for an initial or a new provisional license. But provisional licenses after June 30th, let's see, did I go forward or backwards? Okay, let's see. Sorry. Provisional licenses after June 30th and until June 30th of 2023. Businesses may receive a provisional license if they are a local equity applicant, right? So the DCC, or the Department of Cannabis Control, may issue a provisional license to a commercial cannabis business, right, that is a local equity applicant if the applicant submits a complete application by on or before March 31st of 2023. So there's some extensions in here for local equity applicants, so permit holders locally. For an applicant for a license that includes cultivation, those applicants will also need to have one of the following documents: a final lake and streambed alteration agreement, a draft lake and streambed alteration agreement that's been signed by the applicant and returned to DFW, written verification that DFW, or from DFW, that a streambed lake and streambed alteration agreement is not needed, or written verification from DFW that the applicant has submitted notification, submitted payment of the applicable fees, and is responsive to DFW. So there is an extension for issuance of provisional licenses for those who have been qualified for local equity programs. Provisional licenses after June 30th of 2022 and until June 30th of 2023 for local equity applicants. There are some restrictions. So if the local equity applicant is applying for cultivation, the cultivation premises must not exceed 1 acre of total outdoor canopy or 22,000 square feet of mixed light or indoor cultivation canopy. Additionally, issuance of the license, the provisional license, shall not cause the local equity applicant who holds multiple cultivation licenses on a contiguous premises to exceed 1 acre of outdoor canopy for cultivation, or more than or hold in excess of 22,000 square feet of mixed light or indoor cultivation. So some restrictions for equity applicants, not necessarily relevant here in Mendocino because 10,000 square feet is the cap, but ultimately there's a restriction on contiguous premises, what can be held for cultivation in a contiguous premise. And then they have defined contiguous premise. So it's any premises where the licenses are connected, touching, or adjoining. Renewals, this is really quite important. So provisional license renewals from July 1st of 2022 to July 30th of 2023. This is where we start getting into showing evidence that CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act requirements are being met. So for renewals, right, from July 1st of 2022 to June 30th of 2023, applicants for their renewal will have to show documentation from the local jurisdiction demonstrating that the local jurisdiction is in process of preparing a site-specific initial study, addendum, or checklist to demonstrate whether it is consistent with a previously circulated and adopted negative declaration, mitigated negative declaration, or environmental impact report. This is an important statement for our cultivators and our nursery operators because after On July 1st of 2022 until June 30th of 2023, the state is going to request documentation from the department demonstrating that the checklist, the Appendix G checklist, is being prepared, that it's in process. We can talk more about this during the public comment period of the presentation. Because most folks are preparing, pretty much everyone right now is preparing their own checklist. We'll be having additional conversation with the state to help identify how this documentation will be presented, what will be required. As of right now, I don't think we've sorted any of that out. If the local jurisdiction is preparing the checklist here in the department, it's a little easier to show that documentation. But again, we do recognize that folks are concerned about the department preparing the checklist simply because they've been working hard and spending monies with consultants in preparation of submitting their checklist. So as I mentioned during Wednesday's Board of Supervisors meeting, if and when the department decides to take on the crafting or the drafting of checklists while we're undergoing review of the applications in-house, we will make sure that we create an optional pathway for folks to have us craft that checklist or to continue working with their consultants that they probably and hopefully have already engaged with. Other ways folks can show that they are making progress with CEQA if they are renewing their provisional license between July 1st of 2022 and June 30th of 2023 would be to provide documentation from the local jurisdiction demonstrating that the local jurisdiction has made substantial progress during the previous 12 months of licensure toward completing project-specific environmental review by drafting, preparing, or circulating for public review an environmental document. So this drafting, preparing, or circulating for public review would be if you have a discretionary permit, the staff report which includes the initial study and additional information such as negative declaration or mitigated declaration is in drafting form, preparation form, or has been sent for public notification of an upcoming hearing. Other options include documentation requested by the DCC, the Department of Cannabis Control, of the provisional licensee that demonstrates the furtherance of environmental review during the previous 12 months. Not a lot of information about what that might look like at this time. And other information may be requested by the Department of Cannabis Control from the provisional licensee that demonstrates evidence of substantial progress towards compliance with CEQA during the previous 12-month licensure term, or documentation that demonstrates compliance with CEQA is complete. So this might be your notice of exemption, notice of determination, etc. For provisional license renewals from July 1st of 2022 to June 30th of 2023, for cultivation specifically, there's some additional information that needs to be provided. So cultivation licenses, in order to renew, will be required to show or provide one of the following forms of documentation demonstrating progress with compliance with the Department of Fish and Wildlife's Lake and Stream Bed Alteration Agreement permitting requirements. So from July 1st to June 30th of 2023, cultivation applicants wanting to renew their provisional license will have to also provide a final Lake and Stream Bed Alteration Agreement or a draft Lake and Stream Bed Alteration Agreement that has been signed by the applicant and returned to DFW, or written verification by DFW that the applicant has submitted a complete notification or written verification by DFW that a stream bed alteration agreement is not needed. Provisional license renewals on, goodness, typo, my apologies. Provisional license renewals, I think this is supposed to be, let me open up the code section here one time. Too much minutia, my sincerest apologies. I'm going back one moment. I'm going to go back to this slide. July 1st to 2023. Okay, this is correct. Provisional license renewals on or after July 1st of 2023. I just wanted to make sure that this heading was correct. A provisional licensee must also provide documentation to the Department of Cannabis Control demonstrating that one of the following requirements, CEQA requirements, has been met. So if you're looking to renew your provisional license after July 1st of 2023, on or after that date, you will need to provide CEQA documentation from the local jurisdiction showing that the local jurisdiction has prepared and circulated for public review a negative declaration or a mitigated negative declaration. This is not the pathway for cultivators and nursery operators in Mendocino, but maybe for some other commercial cannabis business entities. Or documentation that the local jurisdiction has determined that an environmental impact report is required and has either made substantial progress in preparing that environmental impact report or has a contract or contracts with consultants in place for preparation of that environmental impact report. May or may not be a pathway for other cannabis businesses, not cultivation or nursery related. This next one, however, is the proof that will need to be submitted on or after July 1st of 2023 for cultivators and nursery operators in Mendocino County. So they'll be required to show that the local jurisdiction has certified that it has conducted a reasonably comprehensive site-specific review and has reviewed, prepared, or deemed complete an initial study, addendum, or checklist. And checklist is really what we're talking about here for cultivators and nursery operators, demonstrating consistency with the previously circulated and adopted, in our case, mitigated negative declaration. The local jurisdiction has reviewed, prepared, or deemed complete a notice of exemption. That notice of exemption is not a pathway for most cultivators unless, of course, they are in a location and conducting activities that require a use permit. Then there may be a pathway for a notice of exemption for this provisional license renewal timeline. Ministerial projects don't fit into this notice of exemption according to what's here in the regulations. Additional information that's required for renewals on or after July 1st of 2023 for cultivators, specifically cultivators and nursery operators. The fish and wildlife requirements kind of ramp up. So the options for fulfilling or meeting the fish and wildlife requirements on or after July 1st of 2023 include submitting a final lake and streamlet alteration agreement or a draft lake and streamlet alteration agreement that has been signed by the applicant and returned to DFW, or written verification from DFW that a streamlet alteration agreement is not needed. So really needing to wrap up those lake and streamlet alteration agreements and at minimum getting into draft form by July 1st of 2023. And then there's some restrictions that come into place here. So the DCC, or the Department of Cannabis Control, will not be reviewing a provisional license for renewal for cultivation if the State Water Resource Control Board has notified the Department of Cannabis Control that the provisional licensee is not in compliance with programs. Additionally, the Department of Cannabis Control will not be reviewing for renewal a provisional license if the Department of Fish and Wildlife has notified the department that the provisional licensee is not compliant with any final streamlet alteration agreement, any conditions set forth in the signed draft lake and streamlet alteration agreement, or any condition established pursuant to sections 26060.1A or B1 and B2 of the Business and Professions Code. So if you have violations that come up with the water boards or the Department of Fish and Wildlife, it's going to be really important to clear up those violations and make sure that you're within your conditions in order to ensure that your provisional license can be renewed on or after July 1st of 2023 if you're a cultivator or a nursery operator. Really important. So let's talk a little bit about how Mendocino County cannabis cultivators are going to move through or work on their CEQA checklist. So I want everyone to be aware that if you go to the Mendocino County Cannabis Program website and click through to the CEQA information, you will find the checklist information. So I'm just going to walk everyone through it. This is what the landing page looks like for the Mendocino County Cannabis Program. And right here is this big greenish box that says CEQA information and consultant list. You're going to want to click through there, or over here, click the CEQA information cannabis tab. They both go to the same place. They'll take you to this page here. We are not planning to update the CEQA checklist, so just be aware of that. We feel that this is a pretty comprehensive explanation of how to proceed, so please do utilize the resources on this page, and if you have questions, please email Cannabis Program with those questions. So cannabis CEQA consultants and or cultivators and nursery operators will be required to complete the document titled Mendocino County Cannabis Permit CEQA Guidelines Section 15168 Review, which is commonly referred to in a much shorter form as the Appendix G checklist. So just so you know, they're one and the same. This includes preparation of a project description that is in conformance with the California Department of Food and Agriculture's memorandum that's dated May 29th of 2019. It's in the resources section, okay? And we'll show it to you. In order to be eligible to submit Appendix G checklist, the cultivators must have their annual permit, right? So you must hold a valid annual county cannabis cultivation permit issued pursuant to 10A17. You must also have completed both your sensitive species habitat review and your air quality management district referral processes. So it's really important because those two pieces provide crucial information for various sections of the checklist. You also must have a valid state cultivation license, a provisional license, or verification from the licensing authority that an application for your annual license is pending review. Some tips for filling out the Appendix G checklist template include answer yes to the checklist questions. So really the checklist is counterintuitive for folks who are used to filling out CEQA documentation. So the Appendix G checklist is asking you in each of the sections whether or not the cultivation site is able to meet the less than significant impacts discussed in that section. If you say, no, we cannot meet those significant impacts or meet less than significant impacts, we're going to kick that checklist back to you, because the entire goal of the checklist is to verify that the permit holder will have, that project will have less than significant impacts, and that the operations are within the scope of the impacts analyzed under the county's mitigated negative declaration. So again, any no answer is an immediate disqualification, and the cultivator should consider an alternative pathway to CEQA compliance. Right now, while the state does have the ability and is in some instances serving as lead agency, in jurisdictions where there is an approved checklist or CEQA pathway, they have been very resistant to taking on the lead agency role. So I'm not sure if they will open up alternative pathways at some time in the future, but right now they have been very resistant to that. Consultants and or cultivators will need to provide site-specific information where noted throughout the checklist. We'll talk about that specifically when I open up the checklist, because I am going to open it and we are going to walk through it briefly, very briefly. Okay. The project description that you insert or that you draft for the checklist must meet all of the criteria outlined in the CEQA practice recommendations from CDFA. Even though we are no longer regulated by the California Department of Food and Agriculture, since the licensing authorities have merged into the Department of Cannabis Control, the CEQA practice recommendations from CDFA is still the document you need to refer to in crafting that project description. The department has not changed what they expect in that project description. So until we hear otherwise, which we might not, this is still the practice document for crafting the project description. There is a scope of work here. This is really talks more about how to interact with the cannabis program or department, review fees, and other process information for submitting your materials and having it reviewed. We do really strongly recommend that when you complete your submission, you're going to send it to cannabisprogram@mendocinocounty.org. You're going to not only submit the Appendix G checklist that's been completed, it must be submitted in track changes, and I'll walk folks through that. And then you're going to also submit your supporting materials in the form of a single PDF that has a table of contents and page numbers. So when you create that PDF that has all of your supporting information for that Word doc for the checklist itself, you want to make sure it's one PDF. You want to put a table of contents on it. You want to make sure that the table of contents references the page numbers that are at the bottom or the top of the page for every page of that document. So please don't give us a table of contents and then no page numbers, right? That sometimes happens and then we kick them back. Please do not submit additional documents. We really are looking for the completed Appendix G checklist template and one PDF that contains all of your supporting material. Improper submissions will be returned to the sender without review. We just do an initial review to say, okay, it looks like they met all of the requirements and we have a complete materials to conduct the review. If we receive submissions that don't appear to be complete or formatted properly, we do kick them back. So just so everyone knows. We really appreciate it if folks use this subject line in their submission. So when you queue your email up, please do include in the subject of that email your AG number followed by CEQA Guidelines Appendix G Review. The AG number is so crucial, as are the words CEQA Guideline Appendix G Review, simply because it gives us a consistent way to search our emails to ensure that if a question comes up from the applicant or the agent, we know how to find what you've submitted if for some reason, heaven forbid, it gets buried or it's assigned to a planner that is out, right? This is really helpful for our staff in responding to your questions if we have consistent subject lines, because again, it makes it easily searchable for staff who is trying to figure out maybe who has your documents or when they came in or whatever the situation may be. Let's talk a little bit about this. This is the template for the Appendix G submission. So this is your Mendocino County Cannabis Cultivation CEQA Guideline Section 15168 checklist. I'm going to scoot this down a little bit. I'm going to make it big. Sorry about needing to scoot it down, but my toolbar is covering the top of this, and I want to make sure folks understand how to put this into track changes. These areas, all areas in this document that are highlighted, are areas that we expect the preparer, either the applicant or the applicant's consultant, to fill in, okay? And so there's a lot of them on the first page. And then we expect the project description to be inserted by the preparer. And then these are the sections of the Appendix G checklist. And these are the check boxes we talked about. So in each of these sections, the question is, are you able to meet the aesthetics requirements, right? And so answering yes is what how you should be answering, because this is verifying that you meet the requirements or the impacts analyzed by the MND. If you answer no to any of these boxes in any of these sections, you will get this kicked back for reconsideration. There are only a few sections in here that require additional information. So for example, on, let's see, it looks like page 5 of 25, we're asking in the air quality section that the preparer insert any additional site-specific information, and that site-specific information may be information that is returned to the applicant when you receive your referral back from the Mendocino County Air Quality Management District, okay? Hence, the reason why you need to have completed your Mendocino County Air Quality Management District form and any subsequent referral before completing your Appendix G and getting it back to us. The same is true for the biological resource section. The biological resource section is where we're going to look for additional information that is relevant to the sensitive species habitat review conducted by the department and or any referral information that came back from DFW. Some folks may have more information to insert in this section than others, depending on the circumstances of their project, right? And the specifics of their project. I'm going to fast forward to the bottom of this, or the end of this document, because I think it's very important for folks to note that on the last page here, you do not sign this area. The reviewer for this document is the department staff that reviews it, right? So we'll be putting, when we certify this document for permit holders, the reviewer name in here. The reviewer will sign it and they will date it. So if during the preparation, the permit holder or the consultant inserts their own information into this section, we will return the document to the permit holder and or their agent, depending on who we received it from. One last thing that's important, I want to talk about track changes. When you are in Word, right, this is a Word document here, click Review. Please leave all markup on, turn track changes on, and then you can insert the month and the year. The date is March, oops, I have my capital locks on, sorry. March 4th, 2022, right? Activity title, commercial cannabis cultivation, right? So we want to see it in track changes like this, okay? Insert the address. My address is 579 Low Gap Road, right? And then you'll insert your APN. So all the way through the document, you'll want to utilize track changes, save it in track changes, and be sure to return it to us as a Word document. Please do not save it with track changes, turn it into a PDF or other form, and then send it to us. right? It must be in track changes and a Word document when we receive it. Otherwise, we will send it back. Okay. Please, please, please do not submit the project description as its own document. You want to insert your project description here in track changes. Okay, we've had a couple consulting firms submit the project description as a separate document, and we've been kicking them back. So please follow the instructions and put the information, all of the information, including the project description, even if it's lengthy. The project descriptions sometimes are quite long. Make sure it all gets into this document. Okay, a lot of information. I'm terribly sorry about how long it has taken us to get through it. Quick reminder of dates, but I do think we need to open the floor for public comment and questions. I know there's probably a ton of questions. I will do my best to respond to them. I'm going to go ahead and open my participants panel. I see that we have a couple folks that have raised their hand. I do really request that folks, if you do want to ask a question, please do raise your hand. To do so, you'll find a hand feature in your toolbar. If you click on it, it will raise your hand. If you click on it again, it will lower your hand. If you're calling in from a phone and not using the Zoom app, you can raise your hand by using *9 on your dial pad, my apologies. You can lower your hand again by using *9. You can unmute and mute yourself once we give you permission to do so by using the microphone feature, either located at the top of your screen, the bottom of your screen, or if you see your identification feature, once we let you unmute come up, there's a mute and unmute feature in the upper right-hand side of your ID box. If you're calling in, you will mute and unmute using *9. I don't know that we'll have 3 minutes. My apologies for not changing that. I think we should start with 2 minutes so that we make sure we get through these questions. And so I'm going to get a note page open so I can take some notes as we go through. Our first caller today is Paul Hansberry and Susan Tibbin. Paul and Susan, you should be able to unmute your microphone and go ahead and make your comment, please.
Hi, yes, this is Paul Hansberry. Thanks for taking my question here. It seems like the Appendix G was intentionally confusing. It's very counterintuitive, and I'm wondering who put that together, first of all. Secondly, there are exact parameters of how everything is to be formatted, or else it will be kicked back. If it is kicked back, does that put us in the bottom of the pile again? We have to start all over? And thirdly, I think you mentioned that you have until July of 2023 to review all of these submissions. And I'm wondering if that's based on how the reviews have come. I know you're anticipating staffing up, but is that a realistic figure for all the Appendix Gs to be completed and reviewed and corrected, in your opinion? I guess that's it. I've got a lot more questions, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you for that, Paul. Who put together the Appendix G? The Appendix G was negotiated between the county and the California Department of Food and Agriculture and finalized in its current form. And it predates my time with the county. If your Appendix G is kicked back because it's not formatted properly or doesn't have the appropriate information, you'll be emailing it back into Cannabis Program. Once we've accepted it, we'll go ahead and assign it to a planner, but then it goes into the planner's queue and in somewhat of a single file line, so it ends up at the back of the planner's review timeline. Is the July 23rd, 2023 deadline going to be feasible for the department to conduct the reviews of the Appendix G materials? I certainly hope so. But again, we just wrapped up, or we're wrapping up, I think this afternoon, interviewing around 70 individuals for 8 open planner positions. We feel like we have a good candidate pool for those planner positions, and we hope to make 8 offers out of that pool. However, we are having some space crisis where we currently are, and we have 1 desk available. So we are hoping to have a move in the near future and or additional space be provided for us here so that we can actually manage the staffing we are anticipating conducting. We are also planning on and waiting for our RFQ that we brought forward to be approved by other county departments so that we can bring on contract planners to assist us with not only processing phase 1 and phase 2 applications, but also processing submitted Appendix G checklists. So our hope is to go from 3 planners that we currently have now to 11 planners in March. So yes, this month. And then hopefully by the end of April, we'll have contracted with an additional 8 contract planners, which would give us, I think, a robust number of around 16 planners to help meet these timelines. So I think it's doable. I think it really is going to be staffing dependent, space dependent, and applicant, permit holder dependent, making sure that you can get those materials to us in a timely manner. Paul, is Susan also on the line with you? Did she want to comment as well?
She's calling in, but I do have one follow-up thing. The state needs an update of progress for CEQA. And if the Appendix G hasn't gotten through the county or reached one of the planners, what are we supposed to do?
So the updated progress for CEQA is on or after July 1st of 2022. We are continuing our conversations with the state. We met with them yesterday. We'll be having more conversation in the near future. And as soon as we know what that update of progress looks like, we will be communicating that back to our applicants and permit holders. But at this time, we don't have that information.
All right, thank you.
Yep, you are welcome. Okay, our next caller is Julia. Julia, you should be able to unmute your device and begin your comment.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you for the thorough review of CEQA. It is much appreciated, I'm sure, for all the listeners. And I assume that this is being videotaped and will be available on the website. I have 2 questions. My first question is, what about between now and July 1st, 2022 for the first issued provisionals? Our office has 9 clients in this situation for various reasons. Some have added an additional type of cultivation. Most have been waiting for LSAs. How they cannot move forward with their initial provisional issuance because they're waiting for CEQA update. How do we address that? And then along that line, my second question is, what about renewals of provisionals between now and July 1st, 2022? We have not received any CEQA requirements in that regard, but will there be CEQA requirements by DCC moving forward between now and July 1st, 2022? And how does our office address the DCC issues with the new provisional licenses requiring MCP CEQA updates? Thanks, Kristen.
Yeah, thanks for that, Julia. I did ask this question yesterday because I had received your emails and your concern, and we had noted it. So based on what I was told by the state, there are no requirements for initial provisional CEQA updates. And that's true for initial provisional issuance, as well as renewals. So the state is aware that we have been running the corrections portal and the complete your application portal. And so they're really wanting to make sure that folks have complete applications. So if you are just applying for your provisional license, they are checking in with us to make sure that your application is complete with the department. They're sending individual emails. So those emails do come to me. If your reviewer at the state tells you that we haven't responded, we have had that happen. We had one applicant yesterday who emailed me with the state on the thread and said, the state told me that they reached out to you, and they forwarded me the email from the state saying that they had reached out to me and that I hadn't responded. I searched my emails. I found the inquiry from the state and I responded same day. I apologize. Sometimes things do get buried in my email. I really, really would appreciate it if folks have general questions, even if that question is directed towards me, if you send that email to Cannabis Program. The reason why it's really important that inquiries that come to me go to Cannabis Program is because my inbox is only viewed by me. And when you send emails to my inbox, it's really easy for them to sometimes get buried. When you send emails with questions for me specifically to Cannabis Program, there are 3 additional individuals checking those emails. And when they realize that an email is specifically for me, they highlight it in a special color that alerts me to look at it. So it's much less likely to get buried over in Cannabis Program than in my personal county email. But again, I just want to reiterate that there's no CEQA updates required for new provisional license issuance between now and July 1st of 2022. There are no CEQA updates required for renewals of provisional licenses between now and July 1st of 2022. The state just wants to make sure that if they're going to issue or renew a provisional license, that they're issuing or renewing that provisional license to an individual who has a complete application with the county. So they're really looking for local authorization.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah.
Just one last thing. I'll email you, but I'm going to request that statement in writing so that I can upload it and we can move those applicants forward, because DCC scientists seem to have a different opinion. Thank you so much for that clarification.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. Our next caller is going to be Corinne Powell. Corinne, you should be able to unmute your device and start your comments.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask. So I am concerned about those folks who did, with the help of a consultant, send in Appendix G review documents. Lots of folks have now separated because their consultants have become missing in action or just generally have moved on since our process has been lengthy and difficult. If someone must change midstream from the consultant system to local county review, how do you propose that that will be best accomplished so that all of the work done with the consultant is not lost and a sort of a do-over kind of thing with the county? And secondly, when do you believe logically and realistically that review of Appendix Gs will commence again in your department with all the things that are happening and staffing still ramping up in information and background? If you could speak to those 2 issues, I'd be most appreciative. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those questions, Corinne. I don't know that I can speak to transitioning from a consultant to county preparation, but boy, is that a good question. And I wrote it down, and I think we really need to have some internal conversation about that question in preparation for the possibility that we'll be preparing these CEQA documents for applicants moving through the process. So I really appreciate that question, and I apologize that I have not considered it and do not have a response for you at this time. When will we be getting back to processing Appendix Gs that have been submitted? This really is dependent on not only staffing, but the amount of work that is put onto department staff, frankly, by the Board of Supervisors to make changes to 10A17, to create new programs such as appeals programs, fallowing programs, overhauling equity programs, right? So every time we are tasked with additional programs to create or revamp or overhaul or you name it, it takes a tremendous amount of staff time to manage those projects. So I have really requested that the board consider not adding new projects to our plate so that we can focus on completing our application reviews, completing and addressing CEQA reviews. And additionally, we have this next 30-day corrections portal. Part of not conducting reviews of the materials that are coming in during that 30-day correction portal and essentially waiting until the correction portal closes is that we are hoping to utilize our full-time staff planners here in the department to conduct application reviews, renewal reviews, and getting back to Appendix G reviews just as soon as we possibly can. We anticipate utilizing contract support or contract planners to conduct the materials or the review of the materials that come in during that corrections portal, which will again help free up our staff for managing application reviews, renewal reviews, and Appendix G reviews. And then we'll be pushing additional material reviews over to contract planners, probably based on zoning, under the assumption that certain zonings such as ag and rural residential perhaps are likely to be easier to review than some of our more upland or remote areas that are zoned in more remote areas. So that is what I know right now. We are hopefully getting to the point where we'll be able to get back to doing more reviews for folks who have complete applications, renewals in need, and CEQA checklists that have been turned in. Our next speaker is Monique Ramirez. Monique, you should be able to unmute your device. There you go. And please start your comment.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say a few things. One, I have a few questions and then a few statements. The first question is, if we have in fact hired a consultant to prepare our documents, and like Corinne said, they jump ship, that is happening in my case. And I literally am at the very last stage of review with my planner. He just needed a couple more things, and I think it was going to be approved. But since my consultant has abandoned me, I'm wondering if I can go ahead and just submit the final changes myself, because I just think that will be ridiculous to have to hire a brand new person at this point in the process. So I wanted to check in about that. And I also just wanted to say that being one of the people going through this process, I had the privilege of getting to see 3 approved Appendix Gs from the county by applicants that turned them in because I'm friends with them and they shared those files after the fact. And that really helped for me to prepare my project description. But what was really alarming through this process is I followed their format, which actually 2 of those documents were prepared by a former county employee. So I felt pretty confident that the way it was written was, pretty good. And what I found really interesting was that going through the process, using the exact format. Now, of course, my project is completely different and unique, but the format was the same. There were moments in my review that I got it kicked back saying, oh, you need to move this paragraph up here and you need to change this paragraph and put it down here. And I'm like scratching my head because I'm like, wait a minute, I'm looking at the ones that have been approved and they kept the format in this way. And I'm referring mainly just to the project description, not changing the format of the actual Appendix G, because of course we can't touch those, paragraphs that are already embedded in it.
Okay, so I apologize. Time was reached, and if we have time to get through more comments, we can get through more comments. I do want to respond to Monique's question about if the consultant started the preparation and you submitted it to the department and then changes need to occur based on what the planner has reviewed. I want to say, absolutely, as a permit holder submitting your Appendix G, if your consultant jumps ship, you absolutely can pick up that process and make those amendments yourself. There is nothing in the regulations or the department's policies that force an applicant or a permit holder who's submitting an Appendix G and starts with a consultant to have a consultant all the way through that process. We do have some Appendix Gs that have been submitted and that are under review and that were fully prepared by applicants. So there is no requirement to use a consultant and there's no requirement to stay with a consultant, if you started with a consultant. Okay, our next caller is going to be Michael Katz. Michael, you should be able to unmute your microphone and start your comments.
Good morning. Yes, thank you so much for holding these meetings. I wanted to just ask 3 questions related to one of the things that Mo just mentioned. With Appendix Gs that have passed, is it possible for the county to provide those with the proper redacted information to provide a format that applicants can use and reliably know that the template that is being provided will be a template that is accepted? So that one is, can the county provide that support? 2, I know it's not being discussed in this legislative session, but regarding the provisional license deadlines, understanding the challenges that not just our municipality and others are facing. The realities are that there will probably still be a provisional licensing crisis before some of these deadlines are up. And I think that it's very possible and would like to hear your thoughts on if that would potentially be addressed up again at the state level. And then finally, I'd like to recommend that the department in your conversations with the state really push for the most generous and broad definition of in progress on the CEQA, understanding that some things are not even being reviewed and we don't know what those timelines will be. It would really be helpful for the department to act as an advocate on behalf of the community and try to provide as much flexibility in that process as possible. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those comments. Let me see here. My apologies. Doing a little maintenance here. Okay, let me address those really quick. Can the county provide approved Appendix Gs to help out applicants with formatting and just clarity about what's expected? I don't know the answer to that. I think that's a question I can ask county council and then we can go from there. So I will inquire and see where we can get on that one. The next provisional license crisis. And I'm going to take both of these questions together, push for the most broad definition of in progress. There's a couple pieces here. We are going to push for the most broad definition of in progress. And I did have some conversation with the state about this yesterday. I'm like, listen, you guys are going to have to figure out a way to be flexible because I have applicants that are preparing their own Appendix Gs that they're not going to be able to necessarily get county information from if they're preparing their own or working with a consultant. So we need to make sure that they're considering that for the in progress components. I also want to say that when we're looking at this provisional license renewals on or after July 1st of 2023, This language here, the local jurisdiction has conducted a reasonably comprehensive site-specific review and has reviewed, prepared, or deemed complete a checklist. I'm actively advocating that the state allow us to consider deemed complete checklist, that we have received a checklist that is in the proper format with the proper information for us to conduct the review, right? So I'm really hoping and strongly advocating for us to have those Appendix Gs in-house, right? We've received them, we consider them complete, now we're reviewing them. That is my goal for what will be acceptable for renewals on or after July 1st of 2023. So that's what we're advocating for and have been advocating for since last July when this language started coming out. We'll get questions like, what does deemed complete mean to your department, Kristen? And I say, well, it means that we accepted it as a complete document that we can review. That's my goal. I don't know if we'll get there, but I just want to make sure folks know that we are advocating for some flexibility on, allowing us to deem the document complete because it's in track changes, it has a project description, it has the supplemental material, and it's ready for us to review. Deemed complete is ready for us to review, not certified by us. So that's my hope. I sincerely hope we get there. And as we come up against these timelines, we will definitely be advocating to ensure that we have flexibility, and as much flexibility as possible to continue working with our applicants and permit holders to assist them in getting through this process. It's really important to us, to the department, to the county, to staff here, and to the community and the applicants as a whole. So with that said, I am going to go ahead and put the timer back up, reset it, and go to our next speaker, who is going to be Hannah Nelson. Hannah, you should be able to unmute your device and start your comment.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great, thanks. Good morning. First off, thanks for the last comment. And I also echo the previous requests to publish the Appendix Gs that have passed. And since they are subject to PRA requests, there really doesn't seem to be a reason why they shouldn't be published with redactions. The question that I had goes back to something that you stated earlier regarding the state asking if applications are complete rather than asking for simply to confirm local authorization. And I'm wondering if you could provide some clarity. My understanding of the DCC current regulations is that they would inquire about local authorization. And of course, there's the statutory period of time where if there's no response, they deem it authorized unless they receive specific information that it's not. But what you said earlier, and maybe I misunderstood it, seemed to indicate a different threshold that they're now asking to confirm whether an application is complete locally.
Is that it for your questions, Hannah?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So yeah, the state is concerned that they may possibly issue a provisional license to an applicant who could be denied by the county for having incomplete application materials. So they are aware that we're moving into the next round of corrections information. We have provided them with additional spreadsheet that helps them understand which applicants that are under review by the department have complete applications, which applicants are eligible for the corrections portal. So they are not wanting to issue provisionals if they don't think the application will be viable going forward. So we are receiving individual emails for local authorization on applications that don't show as in good standing or as being completed through the portal. So that is currently the local authorization request that we are receiving. Okay. We have 10 minutes left, and with that said, I think we should close this section of the conversation. Let's see. Our next section is going to be future agenda items. So I would love it if folks would like to suggest future agenda items to please do raise your hand. We utilize the information that comes in during this time to shape our next meeting. I do want to remind folks that the ad hoc may choose to take over these Friday meetings at some point or time, right? Not all of them, but we may have Friday meetings that are not topic specific based on future agenda items if the ad hoc wishes to have broader conversation with the public over a given topic that they are addressing. So with that said, I see a few hands have been raised. If you are dialing in and not using the Zoom app, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. But the next section here for public comment is going to be suggestions for future agenda items. I'm going to put the timer back up. I'm going to reset it, and I'm going to go to Amy Nguyen. Amy, you are our next caller, and you should be able to unmute your device and start.
Hi, thank you, Kristen, and your fellow staff. Amy Nguyen from Wind Coastal Planning and Biology. I submitted several questions in the Q&A feature. I was wondering for the first part. I'm wondering if you can respond to those.
Searching. Give me a minute here.
Thanks. I'll mute.
Okay. We'll use some of this time here to see if we can get some responses out. Sensitive species and AQMD county review. For early county permit holders, the county did not require these. What is the best way to accomplish this in order to prepare a complete Appendix G? The best way to accomplish that is to submit your sensitive species habitat review questionnaire or your contiguous expansion affidavit so that you can move through that sensitive species habitat review process with the county and, if necessary, subsequent referral to DFW. Same is true for AQMD. If you have not, if you're a permit holder that it was issued a permit before the AQMD process was put in place by the county, please do pull the AQMD form off of the forms page, fill it out, and get it back to us. You can submit these materials, whether it's your SSHR or your AQMD materials, to us via email by emailing those materials to cannabisprogram@mendocinocounty.org. Also, supporting materials and page numbers. Some agency documents don't allow for page numbers to be inserted. So what some folks have done is print out the document, scanned it, and then added the page number. We really do appreciate that. Great suggestion. Thank you so very much for that suggestion. And I think lastly, let's see if we can get in under the timer here. So curious how it came to be that the checklist template was crafted in reverse. You know, I really wish I knew that. It predates me. It was all a negotiation between planning and building at the time and the state. So I have no idea what those conversations were like, but here we are, and it's what we have to work with. Okay, going on to our next caller. Future agenda items, please. Julia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Kristen. Future agenda item, mission statement. In the November farmers meeting, that was unanimous priority for the cannabis then program. My one and only suggestion for a future agenda item is the Mendocino Cannabis Department mission statement. Every other department in the county has a mission statement, and I think it would be very helpful for this department to have a guiding mission statement. Thanks, Kristen.
Thanks, Julia. Appreciate that. Let's see here. Go ahead and lower your hand. And our next caller is going to be Josh. Josh, you should be able to unmute your device and start your comment. Future agenda items.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. Well, thanks again for all your hard work at the department and everyone that hops on these calls. I've asked once before, and I think I'll continue to ask unless it's been addressed somewhere in another webinar that I missed. I would love to learn a little bit more about how the county is working with code enforcement and other agencies to support the removal of illegal operations. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. I'll give you a little insight on that while we have some time here from your comment. How we're working with code enforcement and other agencies. Code enforcement specifically, we really only engage with code enforcement if there's complaints and code enforcement is desiring to visit a location that is in our program. So the cannabis department does not work with code enforcement to address unpermitted or non-program locations. Other agencies such as the Water Board and Department of Fish and Wildlife, we do have regular meetings with them about enforcement, and they'll generally provide us with a list of locations that don't have environmental permits, and then we'll go through and identify if any of those locations are in our program. If those locations are in our program, we have previously pulled those locations out of their enforcement list and then addressed those locations with corrections letters and requirements that they meet at least make the application move forward with the Water Board and or DFW. So hopefully that helps. We don't address any cultivation outside of our program. Okay, our next caller is going to be Britt. Britt, you should be able to go ahead and unmute your device and start your comment.
Good morning. As I always say, thank you so much for holding these meetings. My questions for future agenda items are with the SSHQs, in particular, generator management plans. I've submitted a few. I've done a couple noise studies based on Humboldt County CEQA standards, trying to implement them into our Appendix G in Mendocino. One of my questions is, are we going to be doing CUPA enforcement? What is code enforcement with generators and not being enrolled in CUPA? And moving forward, what the county expects to see in generator management plans, as a bunch of the ones I've handed in have turned it out inconsistent to what the county wants. And the noise study was accepted, but if we could please show a boilerplate template to future applicants so we can do this in a timely and efficient manner. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Okay, we have just a couple more callers. Amy, we probably won't get back to you. I'm so sorry because we're 1 minute out from ending the meeting and we already heard from you, so I apologize. We are going to go to our next commenter, which is Hannah Nelson. Hannah, future agenda items. You should be able to unmute your microphone, and I think we can hear you.
Great, thanks. Sorry for the phone call in the background. If two topics for future, one is the standardized policies and procedures of MCP, and particularly I'd love if they're published, but then an opportunity for MCP to go through, MCD, to go through them so that people have a good understanding of the standards against which their applications are judged and the policies and procedures. And then the second topic would be MCD's recommendations for the forthcoming appeals process that may be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay. Our next and our last caller today is going to be Michael Katz. Michael, you should be able to unmute your device. Let's see. There we go. You should be able to now. Yes, looks like you've got it. I'm going to reset the timer.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to recommend for future meetings that there be more opportunities for people to ask questions and just, more kind of question stuff than maybe presentation stuff. And I'd like to yield the rest of my time to Chantal Simone Pietri, who I believe has her hand up but hasn't had a chance to speak yet. Thank you.
Chantal, did you want to utilize some of Michael's time? I will go down here and allow you to speak. It looks like you should be able to unmute your microphone. You have a minute, 26 seconds.
Great. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, super. I would support the other suggestions for future agenda items, just keeping to what this time right now is for. My questions coming back into the Appendix G material, I'll just list them. I also put them all into the Q&A. And so if questions are put into the Q&A and they're not answered by you live during the webinar, would you please respond to those by email or have somebody from the staff respond to those by email? This has happened each weekly meeting where there's just kind of a rolling list of questions that are unanswered. The first one I put up into the chat has to do with the SSHR and contiguous expansion affidavit process and how those changes from the recent board meeting, yesterday's meeting or whenever it was, maybe, and the Appendix G, how it relates to Appendix G. The second one is, and the specifics of my question is more detailed in the actual Q&A that I typed in. What are the standards of review for the Appendix Gs that have been submitted? How many have already been submitted, reviewed, returned, finalized? What is the timeline for when you're going to begin to review? Again, I understand that was asked, I believe, by Corinne Powell earlier. When was the most recent approval? Just trying to get an idea of where is the department at? And most specifically, what about the typographical errors in the template that is provided? How do we address those and what we're...
All right, time had been reached. We would love to respond to questions that come in through the Q&A. However, we have been incredibly backlogged and have not had the time to respond to those questions. Much of those responses would probably fall on me to craft, and I have not been able to do so. Sensitive species habitat review and contiguous expansion affidavit, as we looked at the template earlier, that template has the biological resources section, and this is where you will be utilizing the materials provided in that sensitive species habitat review to show less than significant impacts will be the result of your project. Those responses from either the department and or Fish and Wildlife will go into that section of your Appendix G. The last Appendix G checklist that we reviewed and approved occurred before August 2nd. Again, I want everyone to be well aware, and I want to make it absolutely 100% clear that once the portal opened and got into full swing, we pulled 100% of our planning staff off of all other reviews so that we could address the portal. So we have not gotten back to conducting other reviews because we have been directed by the board to continue moving forward with corrections portal. We are just starting as of, probably the beginning of January, getting to renewals. They are our priority so that folks don't expire. Once we get through renewals, and it is kind of a peak renewal season, we have 2 peak renewal seasons, one in the beginning of the year and one in the middle of the summer. So we have a slew of renewals to process, and planners are working diligently on managing those renewals. And then they keep getting pulled off of renewals so we can do activities such as address the vegetation modifications we've identified, and other review concerns. So we'll be getting back to that. I don't have numbers currently about how many have been submitted as far as Appendix Gs, nor do I have numbers about how many have been completed. There's no way for me to, or the department to really track that in an efficient manner. We are looking at doing an overhaul to our permit tracking platform, which would allow us some ability to export that sort of data, right? Who's submitted, what is the where are they in the progress of review, how many have been certified. But currently, the permitting system or the platform is not built out for us to be able to capture that information. So I have no way of exporting those numbers or that data back to the public. Okay, with that said, it is 10:06 and I'm going to go ahead and adjourn today's webinar. I thank everyone for joining. We'll be back at it next Friday at 8:30 a.m. So thank you all. Have a really fabulous weekend and we will talk to you next week.